Well, it's not the most brilliant of days, I have to say. My blasted hips are still, um, well, just doing their thing. It's one of those times when sitting down is as painful as walking. Um, Laying down is sort of okay. But I have to say that I am most comfortable when I'm sitting in this, because as you can see, well, you can't see the bottom half of me, but you'll have to take my word for it, that I'm half laying down. My legs are directly up. Um, anyway, I've been thinking today about how little human beings seem to understand the concept of personal responsibility. Um, Although I guess I have to say that at first glance it seems a fairly easy concept to understand. But as I said, that's just at first glance, and then it becomes more complicated the more deeply you think about it. But I was thinking about this in relation to George Bush and Tony Blair, and oh, I can't remember what the twat's name is, but not the president, the governor of Texas. The idiot that's calling for a mass get together for prayer. This man who has killed quite a number of people since he's been in office. Yes, I did say he's killed, because although he has clearly distanced himself from the fact that he has blood on his hands, it actually doesn't work, because they have executions in Texas. They even execute subnormal people, mentally subnormal people, or whatever the correct term is for that nowadays. But you get my idea, and they just executed a man that they knew to be innocent. But, the stay of execution wasn't granted. And anyway, that's really all beside the point. They can be as guilty as sin. But that still makes the people who signed the warrant personally responsible for their killing. And they seem not to get that. It's like when George Bush and Tony Blair declared war on Iraq. What they'd actually agreed to was the killing of children and women and men. I don't quite see why people always say, and they killed women and children. Well, what's up with us men? Why isn't it sad to kill us? That does never make sense to me either. But anyway, see, it's all to do with the language that they use. They use the language of war to separate themselves from what they're actually doing. And, let's just speak about Tony Blair and forget about George Bush, although, he did exactly the same thing. And I'm not talking here about, please don't misunderstand me, I am not talking here about the relative right or wrong of going to war. That is not the issue. What I'm talking about is that when one makes such a decision, one is actually deciding to kill other people. And you quite clearly think that for whatever the cause the war is for, it is fine to blow children up. I'm not saying, of course, that is the intention, but it is what happens and you can't escape it. And you're a fool if you think otherwise. And you are personally responsible for those deaths. It's like, if you agree with capital punishment, I wonder how many of those people who actually agree with capital punishment would do the killing themselves. And if they would do the killing themselves, then one seriously has to wonder what's up with them. And why does that make you any different from the person that you're killing? I've never quite understood that, particularly as I see um, state-sponsored killing, which we refer to as capital punishment, um, as being far, far worse than the crimes that the person's supposed to have committed, because it's cold-blooded, it's calculated, and it leaves blood on the hands of many, of everybody involved, absolutely everybody. And as for these sickos that go and watch it, which you're allowed to do in America, well, I'm sorry, but I really think there's something seriously wrong with people. And and before you start, I get rather sick and tired of that old chestnut. Oh, but if you've been the victim, you might think differently. Well, I was a fucking victim, and I don't think differently. I'm still alive, obviously. And death is not the worst thing that can happen. But anyhow, it doesn't do anything. Revenge doesn't undo a thing. And there is absolutely no rehabilitation when you've killed them. But anyway, again, sorry, I'm going way off the point. I don't mean to get into the rights or wrongs of these things, just pointing out that we cannot abdicate personal responsibility. We can't escape it. Whether we're aware of it or not, we are personally responsible. Now, the other thing, of course, that's all tied up with this is knowledge. Because we can only act in ways that we know. And we can only make choices out of the choices that we know. Let's say you're at a buffet and you've got chicken and there's pork and there's cucumbers and there's antipasti and pickled mushrooms or pickled cabbage or whatever. So that's those there. Beef isn't there, so you can't pick it. And if you don't know that beef exists, how could you possibly pick it? Do you follow? So we can only make choices out of what we know. And as I've explained before, that all that's happened in my recovery of myself, of my fragmented self, to talk in terms of a computer, I was seriously defragmented. And I ran a defrag program that took years, but it worked, at least as far as I'm concerned it worked, because I'm happy. I don't really give a shit what you lot think, except that I do know that my ramblings do have a positive effect on some people. Anyway, oh bugger, I've gone and forgotten again. Oh yes, defragmenting. But I was fragmented. Hang on, get this the right way round, Colin. Yes, I was fragmented, and then I ran a defrag operation on myself, and I'm no longer fragmented. I don't know what the word is for no longer fragmented. I don't suppose... Oh, whole. Yes, I'm whole. Well, as whole as I can be. But, one of the things I discovered during my 5 years of therapy, which basically was just being listened to and guided, it was never ever telling me what I should or shouldn't do. However, that Roger pointed out to me that there were other ways to think. There were other ideas that were equally valid. And this was extremely shocking to me because I'd never thought about that. I didn't know. You see, my training had been excellent. The only people to believe were the hard, rigid people that taught me as I grew up, i.e. my parents and the church. It did not occur to me that there were other ideas, or rather, because my questioning had been severely stamped upon, I gave up the idea that there were other ideas. And I certainly gave up the idea that it was good to have other ideas and to question, and that I really didn't need to think the way that I thought. And that if I wanted to be happy, I had to change the way that I thought. And that's really, there is no magic answer. There isn't a pill you can take that makes you feel better. Well, it'll make you feel better temporarily, but not permanently, unfortunately. You know, you have to do the work, which means that you have to clear all the shit out of here. And that doesn't mean you all have to think like me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, you know, these ideas... Actually, I think that's probably fairly evident. I don't think I've ever in these things told any of you who are listening what you ought to be thinking. All I'm telling you is that there are lots of options, and that you don't have to think the way you were brought up to think. The one thing that really pisses me off is I vote Labour because my parents voted Labour. Or, you know, well, it's the way I was brought up, I can't change. Fuck off, of course you can. What you mean is you don't want to. You don't want to make the effort, you know, and, you know, if there is such a thing as an afterlife and there is such a thing as facing ourselves and having to account for ourselves, which I believe is perfectly possible, although I certainly do not believe in a being that's going to stand there and judge us and throw us into the pit if we've been no good and take us. Do you know, these people that say animals don't have souls, well, can you imagine a heaven without dogs in it? Or without cats, or without any sort of animals? Well, I can do without snakes, thank you very much. And spiders and bumblebees. There was a huge bumblebee in here earlier. Fortunately, I opened the window and said shoo, and it shooed out. It was making a hell of a racket. I thought something was going wrong with my computer. And there I've gone and done it again. Sorry, I've got to move. I've got to... I've gone off the point. Oh dear. Oh, that's better. No, it's not time yet. It's only 3:30. Bugger off. No, I'm not talking to myself or to an imaginary friend. I've got a four-legged friend down there who thinks it's DINNER time, and it isn't. Yeah, you can sit and look pretty all you like and appealing, but you're not. It's not time. So, it's up to you in the end how you think. But, as I've said, you know, this is the whole reason why, in my opinion, that they can't, getting back to this, the religion idea, that you can't possibly make a decision as regards your soul, the permanent state of your soul, if you like, in one lifetime. It is just not possible, because there is no way that we are going to be able to learn all of the choices. It seems to me that the only person that would, or the only being that could possibly know what all the choices are is God, not us. So how can we be held responsible? Yes, I know, that appears like to be a big contradiction, doesn't it? But the unfortunate thing is, you see, when you're young, you're ignorant that fire burns. And you stick your hand in it, and what happens? You burn. Now, the fact that you were ignorant of that doesn't save you from being burned. You still suffer the result of your action, even though your action was based upon ignorance. You see, and we all do. We all reap basically what we sow. And we may think that other people don't. We may think that other people are getting away with stuff. It only appears that way. And really you shouldn't be concentrating on them anyway. What you need to be concentrating is on yourself. I know, I mean, there have been times when I have felt quite resentful at the supposed physical and financial success of the rest of my family. And it appears that, they did all that at my expense, which of course they did, but I cannot afford to think that way, because the point is, the one who's really happy is me. I'm the one with a successful relationship, the only one with a successful relationship. Although my parents were married for over 40 years, I don't consider their relationship successful because of what they did to us children, and because he married within a year of my mother dying. Again, that's all another long story. I didn't even know my mother had died. I found out via the internet something like 2 or 3 years after the fact, which actually was quite a release for me. I don't mean the release of the fact that she'd died, but it really stopped me wondering if I had been too harsh in my assessment of my family. Certainly not if they can't have told me that my own mother had died. And it's not that they couldn't tell me, it's not that they didn't know how to contact me. They could easily have contacted me, no problem at all. They knew where I lived. But, unfortunately there are consequences to everything that we think and do. We may think that there are not, but there are. There's no escaping the fact that what we think and do has a result. Now, we can pretend otherwise. I can get a pot of Haagen-Dazs and think to myself, yes, this is, something like 1,500 calories a pot, because it's full of fat and full of sugar, and it's absolutely wonderfully delicious. Now, I can eat that and I can say to myself, well, you're going to have to swim this off, or, this is going to give you the shits, or any number of things. Or I can pretend, it's not going to do me any harm whatsoever and I won't put on any weight if I eat this, which is what a lot of us tell ourselves. But of course also for a lot of us it isn't a choice either. If food is our medication, it becomes not a choice. This is going to get into very complicated ground. Well, actually, it's not that complicated. It's really quite simple, but I don't want to go there right now. I just want to go with the fact that it's like I was just absolutely distressed. I'm not going to say heartbroken, because the person that was really heartbroken was his mother. But this 10-year-old effeminate black boy that hung himself in America. I can't remember the city. I'm very sorry about that. I feel like I ought to remember more of the details about this poor child. But he hung himself because of homophobic bullying. And quite simply, if you're expounding the view that there's something wrong with us, that we're evil, or that we are defective in some way, then you are responsible for that boy's death, because you create the atmosphere within which the homophobic bullying can take place. And it is very different to other sort of bullying. Yes, people will be bullied for all sorts of reasons, that's for sure. But this particular one is much more insidious and much more soul-destroying. To grow up believing that you're intrinsically evil is not good. And, if you're adding to that, then you do have personal responsibility. And because I do believe that our consciousness survives physical death, I do believe that we never ever escape the consequences of our thinking. And once again, I keep having to repeat this because I just need you lot to be certain. I am not, in consequences, I am not talking about some fiery pit for eternity. But we can go on about that some other time, perhaps. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. Have a good day, people. Bye.